as this group here in Australia grows, as more disciples are found that can be taught. Every few dozen you may find one, but look for them. Don't let them go back into the crowd. Educate them. Listen to the masters. Let them tell you who their disciple is, who is not. Fight off the DB. Continue growing. Continue striving. We don't stop. One initiation mastered simply means that there's the next one ahead. No rest for disciples. No rest for initiates. No rest for bodhisattvas. All the time every bodhisattva is looking for more and more skillful means for the education of the all. Everything in life is illusional. Everything is transitory. Nothing stands still. We grow old. The only thing that survives after us is what we have done to help sentient beings. And of course, if we've done a lot of things to harm sentient beings, then that also survives. The samskaras come. Much has been given to us in vision. Much has been given to us in coldness. Much is a continuing vision. We live in two worlds. We live in the world of enlightened being. We live in the world of our meditation experiences. And we live in this physical world of samsara. We fuse sunyata and samsara into one, both at the same time. This is the Nyingma way. This is what is called the Great Mahamudra, or the Greater Majjhimika, or the Yogacarya Majjhimika, which is basically what I want to describe to you. More Nyingma teachings. Therefore, I want to give you a sequence of teachings derived from the book by Dudjom Rinpoche. This is a picture of Dudjom Rinpoche here. This is his book, his main text. He is basically the head of the Nyingma order. The Nyingma are much more separated than, say, the Geluk, who have a very concise, precise, hierarchical structure. The Nyingma have different groupings and not so hierarchical. He was one of the greatest. I recommend anyone that has some time to go through this 1,000-odd pages here. The book used to be very expensive, over $250 to produce this cheaper version now, which is still very expensive. Continue with my reading from page 244, Dudjom Rinpoche's book. On Saturday I read out from the Heruka Gyalpo. Through the causal vehicle of dialectics, mind as such is perceived as the cause of Buddhahood. Through the resultant vehicle of mantras, mind as such is meditated upon as Buddhahood. So too one should know well the tendency of any cause or result. And then I explained the difference between the cause of Buddhahood and as Buddhahood. Now, the teaching is the secret mantra teachings which I'm trying to give to you. So, according to the vehicle of mantras, this is the Nyingma doctrine, the Yogacarya Majjhimaka. According to the vehicle of mantras, on the other hand, mind as such abides primordially and intrinsically as the essence of the result, identified in the Buddha bodies and pristine cognition. Mind as such is thereby established as the ground which exists within oneself from the present moment as the object to be attained. It is then established as the path through its functions of bringing about recognition and removal of the provisional stains which suddenly arise by means of inducing the perception of just what is, and is established as the result through its function of actualizing this very ground. Now there's a few words here. We talk about the ground, which is the pristine cognition of a Buddha, which exists within oneself from the present moment as the object to be attained, and is then to be established as the path. So we've got the ground and the path. So the function of bringing about recognition and removing of the provisional stains which suddenly arise by means of inducing the perception of just what is. Now, this is precisely what I want to talk about now, the provisional stains. And this is the path that all of you here are following. This is our teaching. What are the provisional stains which suddenly arise by means of inducing the perception of just what is? What does he mean by this? It suddenly arises by inducing the perception of just what is. How would you describe this process? It is then, mind as such is established as the ground, which is the pristine cognition. It is then established as the path, now the mechanism of bringing forth the ground, or this pristine cognition, the clear mind, right, or the Buddha mind, is described as such. Its functions of bringing about recognition and removing the provisional stains which suddenly arise by means of inducing the perception of just what is. What are the provisional stains? Samskaras. That is right. All your imperfections, the attributes of mind that keep you tied to samsara, that keep you addicted to maya, that come from your past lives. So as you apply the energy of just what is, out come your stains. Mm-hmm. What else do you see these stains as? Foibles, yes, go on. Anyone else? Give it a more esoteric way of looking.
Murky devas.
Murky devas? Come on. You guys are experts in this. Yeah, all your DV stuff. These are your stains. You have to do zapping a lot. You've got to deal with the murky substance of your emotional and mental vicissitudes. You've got the karma that come to the surface. You've got all your addictions and attachments. This is the method of the Nyingma, is to bring these stains to the surface. Now, you're not going to bring these stains to the surface if you're drinking alcohol, if you're playing around with all sorts of samsaric foibles and even meat or even gross foods, are you? They remain buried. You only bring them to the surface when the ground comes out. What is the ground which he is talking about, therefore? It abides primordially and intrinsically as the essence of the result, identified in the Buddha bodies and pristine cognitions.
The Buddha mind, yes. The innate enlightened nature.
That's the Buddha mind, the innate enlightened nature. Any other ways of defining it?
The soul.
Soul, what we call monad. You can call it the collective awareness of the council of bodhisattvas, the hierarchy of light. They apply their energy.
Shambhalic gift
potency, that is right. So all of this then comes into you, and as these energies, this pure energy pours into you, it liberates the stains, and you go through your testings. Your testings for enlightenment. You have to overcome the obscurations of mind. You have to overcome all the deviant attacks. You have to overcome your samskaras. You have to work through them. Because the stronger the energy of this pristine cognition pours into your consciousness, the more your fundamental obscurations come to the surface from the past and in the present. This is a very, very, as you can see, quick summary of the entire path to enlightenment. And you guys know that this takes quite a lot of years to deal with these stains. They come one after the other according to whatever chakra is being cleansed. Of course, when we're talking about the chakras being cleansed, the energies, the pranas in the nadi system coming to the surface, minor chakra after minor chakra, and then larger chakra after larger chakra, until all the petals get cleansed in sequence, and then you go through another round of cleansing on a higher spiral, and another round of cleansing on a higher spiral. This is called tantra, when it's done in a conscious way. In fact, the highest yoga tantra. Yes, yes, a question.
Two questions. One is short. The stains from a exoteric sutra-based Buddhist viewpoint, would they be the grasping at the self or grasping at any sort of phenomenal entity as a truly existing thing?
Yes, all forms of clinging, all sorts of forms of grasping, the six poisons, these are all the stains. You can look at it from the conventional way, and then we can look at the conventional teachings and give the esoteric correspondences. But stains is quite clearly a type of energy that is not radiantly pure. It's the colorings of dirt, of mud. You all know what stains are when it gets onto your clothing. And so you have to wash those out of your system, and you actually have to wash them using successful cycles of cleansing. Because some of the stains are very deep and ingrained, and they seem to have a predilection of coming back again after they've been washed out, like the stains in my coat jacket. They wash them once and they come back again. So this is the fun part of it, right? So we've got the ground. So you all know what the ground is. That's the basic intrinsic pureness or the intrinsic awareness. Then you've got the path, and then you recognize the provisional stains. Of course, there's another form of stain in the Yogacarya doctrine called manas, defiled mind. So you go from the emotions to aspects of the mind. And then you go, which is suddenly arrives by means of inducing the perception of just what is. So as you perceive the reality, out comes the impurities. They're revealed for what they are. Until you perceive just what is, you reside in and live in those impurities as if they're your very own self, and you take them to be reality in the sense you laugh and sing and live in accordance to that which you're totally blinded to. But when the reality of just what is comes into consciousness, you begin to see the maya that you've been floundering in up till then. And then, as you apply yourself, deeper and deeper levels of the maya appear to your gaze, and you start to understand just what very disgusting little, sometimes in Buddhism you can call it a bag of pus or sort of worm-ridden, maggoty sort of corpse that you're walking around in really is. And you want to fling it away at a cemetery. We're talking actually proper yogi philosophy here. Those that want to sort of cremation grounds and charnel houses, whatever, doing their yogic austerities, such as magic Dudjom, they sit and then they look at what the reality is of a physical body in terms of having died and it's starting to dissolve away with all the maggots and the worms and every insect and fighting over a bit of the flesh and its pestilence and its smells. And you say, is that really what I am? Or is that what I was? Is that what all of this selfishness and self-centeredness and everything else that I fought for in samsara when I was a personality, was that what it achieved? What's the use of all this money that I worked for and all of this violence that I used to take from others what I wanted, when the end result is all that pestilence and maggoty activity? So that's another sort of way of looking at what happens when the perception of just what is comes into being. We look at our personality lives, this body that we live in. As a bodhisattva, you look at it as a vehicle of service. You say, this exists so that all sentient beings can benefit by its example and by its activities. There's no other reason for its existence. Therefore, it exists so that one can develop skillful means so that all sentient beings can be helped. This is the way of a Buddha, the way of enlightened being. Those that don't think this way say that this exists so that it can get pleasure for itself. It can amass upon it a whole pile of wealth and eat lovely food and live in luxurious palaces. This is what it exists for. But then, when this perception of just what is comes into consciousness, then one sees that all those forms of activity produces that maggoty-ridden body, and then the health states afterwards, and further samskaras, which produce health states of consciousness in future lives. It's not what this exists for, this transience that we carry around us. When we really examine this transience, this body, I really like to think in terms of event horizon of appearing samskaras. You get the past moving into the present future, and the past is composed of different samskaras bound by the 5 aggregates. So the 5 elements and their various permutation move into the present future. That's what we are from the point of view of Buddhism, really. Samskaras are skandhas, which are bundles of aggregates that are continuously moving into the present future, overgrowing or dissipating according to which way on the path to Buddhahood one is traveling. Of course, it's all bound by mind, conditioned by mind. The Nyingma teachings here uses this enlightenment state as mind as such, with a capital M. That's the Buddha mind, that quality of mind that is the 5 Buddhas of meditation. So these provisional stains are really the stains of the 5 samskaras that come to the surface upon the moving event horizon of the now that you call your personality vehicles. And as the perception of just what is gazes upon it, it works to transmogrify the moving skandhas into the various attributes of the wisdoms of the 5 Tathagatas, the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, and their concepts. So the stains get transmogrified. They become wisdom's perception, and enlightened being is the consequence. They are not to be destroyed or annihilated. They get transformed. This is the Nyingma way. We live with them, we work with them as they come to the surface of our perception, and we transform them into enlightenment attributes. Therefore, we relish the stains. We zap the DB. What is another term for zapping DB anyway? But infusing the stains of the cosmic landscape with the white bright light, or to rephrase it, the energies of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, to convert them, transmogrify them into the way of light, the way of the Lords of Life. They are samskaras of a far vaster entity than you are, that is all. So you work at the transmogrifying, transmuting, if you wish, the inner samskaras of your passions, your lusts, your desires, your ambitions, your attachment to selfhood, all this ego clinging and craving of material things that defile the body, speech and mind, and at the same time, as bodhisattvas, you cleanse the external samskaras that exist in the psychic atmosphere around you. This is what we call zapping. But it is also the purifying of the atmosphere in which human beings and devas think, live emotionally. We want to see a very clean earth indeed. We want to see an earth that sounds like this bell when it's rung. We want to see a sacred planet, where presently it is a non-sacred planet. We want to see the outer hells gone. We want to see the elimination of the condition called hell altogether, for all. And this is a higher interpretation of the provisional stage which suddenly arise by means of inducing perception of just what is. So you can see the perception of just what is quite a vast statement, and you can only induce the perception of just what is in gradual stages from the beginning stages of the bodhisattva path right through to the 10th Bhumi, the highest level, and then beyond you become a Buddha. Stage after stage, the perception of just what is comes into being until just what is just what is. Nothing else is. Everything is seen for what it is. And is established as the result through its functioning of actualizing this very ground. And we've just talked about this. So we got the ground, the functioning, and the establishment of it. Such a sequence in which cause precedes result is not really distinguished therein. It is called the resultant vehicle. and in Tibetan it raspu tekpa. And the vehicle of indestructible reality, doje tekpa. It is said in the Secret Nucleus, which is one of the Buddha Sutras, chapter 12, verse 14, from any of the 4 times and 10 directions, the perfect Buddha will not be found. Mind as such is the perfect Buddha. Do not search for the perfect Buddha elsewhere. In other words, if you're looking for the Buddha external to yourself, you'll not find him. The perfect Buddha is already there. All you have to do is, of course, bring it into functioning through the eradication of provisional stains. Does it sound as simple as it actually is? You can read the sentence in a fraction of a minute. And I know many people that glibly read through a book like this and then go on to the next book and the next book, completely forgetting that just one sentence is going to take more or less a lifetime or more to accomplish. So mind as such is the perfect Buddha. Do not search for the Buddha elsewhere. Incidentally, this teaching is very much of the Zen tradition. And in chapter 13, verse 19, the result, definitive and most secret, has been turned into the path. And also in chapter 9, verse 29, this wondrous, marvelous, amazing reality does not come into existence from elsewhere, but it emerges in these dispositions, which have the nature of discriminative awareness, steadfast and skillful means. So we've got discriminative awareness, and we can see now discriminative awareness is one of the ways of dealing with these provisional stains. The stains come to the surface, and you use discriminative awareness to work out how to transmute them, what the errors are, where the correctness is, and the mode of transmutation. And the mode of transmutation here is called skillful means. What is meant by skillful means is the bodhisattva path, the development of the bodhisattva bhūmis, where in Mahayana Buddhism we work for the extinction of suffering in all sentient beings. We work for the harmonizing or the perfectment of all upon this planet, so that everything rings out a beautiful note of joy and like that of bliss. What is skillful means? Well, this is what all of you are trying to achieve. You use it according to your various ray methods, your personality predilections, your karma from past lives. It pushes you on to work out vehicles of service by which, according to your capacity, the greatest number of sentient beings can be helped in this life. And what does this mean? Elimination of concept of self. How can there be a concept of self if you're not thinking of the self at all, but of how all other sentient beings can be benefited? Self is abased because the all-self, if you want to use such a paradoxical term, is sought after in order to be enlightened. Whenever you're trying to eliminate self and you're busily meditating upon self, how can self eliminate self? It's not possible. There's always a concept of self when you're thinking of the little self in your meditations. Only when you forget yourself and lose it in the absorption of the greater whole can you forget about self. Can it be merged into the all? And this is skillful means. I'd like you all to think much more about what does the term skillful means for you. What is skillful for you may not necessarily be skillful for someone else. It is different according to the equipment of response, the samskaras that one is bringing to the surface at any point of the event horizon, and the application of the service. In other words, the field of application around you. In the case, for instance, the field of application is a university setting as well as this group here. A skillful means is to work out how best to serve both needs. For somebody else here, it can be one's work situation, philosophy, it can be people that come to him for teaching. Whatever it is, the skillful means is different per individual. So, and the phrase here is steadfast in skillful means. There's no wavering. Every aspect of the bodhisattva or the yogi, if you want to use that term, is steadfast in the development of skillful means. That is what life is about. Learning all aspects of the Dharma is part of it. Learning concrete science, that's part of the methodology of eradicating ignorance and suffering in this planet. Learning social skills for helping the poor and the stressed. Many different types of skillful means are utilized, but one must be steadfast in one's application.
So part of the goal of embodying a group of the enlightened Sangha is the ability to awaken the various skillful means of each being and then threading those into a unified mandala.
That is right. That's the task of the teacher always. Teacher always thinks of mandala. Since cause and result are primordially without sequence, when the result has been turned into the path, they are simultaneously united. Cause and result are primordially without sequence. What does that mean?
The sequence of cause and effect. In other words, it's actually just an illusion. It's just a sequence that you perceive as being through time, but actually...
Yes, it's basically got to do with the concept of the eternal now. When one attains the enlightenment state, there is no such thing as time per se. Cause and effect is but the one vision. The one resides in a causeless state. When the result has been turned into the path, they are simultaneously united. Now, the result has been turned into the path is quite an interesting statement, because basically what happens, we that work within the precepts of enlightenment, we live in the future. Everyone else lives in the past. What do I mean by that?
Does an enlightened being have karma?
Now there's a good question. Does an enlightened being have karma still? Basically it means this, that when you are unenlightened, then you're bound by karma. The karma manipulates you this way and that, and you produce all sorts of actions based on ignorance. And ignorance to me is similar to stupidity, based on ignorance, where you produce more samskaras. The samskaras are the basis of future patternings of karma, and this is cause and effect. When you're on this path of enlightenment, the result is already applicable. There's no more weaving of karma into new karmic strands. There's just simply the cleansing of the karma, which is the result. And that is the path. Whatever the karma is, that you ride into the state of karmalessness. And as you cleanse the karma, taking all the blows as it comes to you, you all know the problems of our karma. Most people, when they get the karma of the past deeds, don't like it. They don't like receiving what they've dished out to others in former lives. They scream and shout, and they often create much more new karma as a consequence. It's terrible for many to suddenly be at the end of the hammer blow of what you've diced out to others. And the karma is emotional, mental, and physical. But one who is enlightened, like Jesus was, for instance, will take the blows of karma right onto the most excruciating crucifixion and take the suffering of the world on their shoulders. And that then becomes the path, because one previsions, sees the future of every action and follows that future to its inevitable conclusion. That is the nature of enlightened being. Would you like to know all of your karma before you have to live it? What, say, your karma was to enter into a vehicle and is going to suffer a nice road smash? Would you willingly go into that vehicle?
I think my partner did.
Your partner did.
He knew it was coming.
Yeah.
That accident they had in the car, and they checked the car, they stopped the car and looked at it, and everything seemed all right, but he knew that it was coming that day, and then they had this accident, and he got some terrible injury, and he was lying on the side of the road. But he did it anyway.
Okay, this is provisioning, and this is what they're doing, turn into the path. That's the only way to Buddhahood. How can you become a Buddha if you don't cleanse the karma? That keeps you tied to the wheel of birth and death, to dependent origination. A Buddha is freed from that and can then travel on the cosmic path veiled by dharmakāya. Is that not so? So you prevision the path as you walk it, and for those around you. That is the eternal now. The three times become one, the past and the present. The future, which is the now. They are simultaneously united.
I have a question about another possible interpretation of the result turned into the path.
Okay, give us this one.
Well, the result can often refer to sort of the enlightened nature, the result being enlightenment or Buddhahood, or awakening to that, right? And so I was sort of having the thought that when you realise that state, then you then take that energy, that inspired vision that you get, whether it's of the Sambhogakaya or direct from the Dharmakāya, like seeing just what is, and then you bring that back into the path, i.e. zapping, that energy that you use then to transform, or you're bringing that enlightened state back into walking still and transforming your state.
Yes. Similarly, with reference to the outer tantras, the sutra, the sequence of the path says, through discriminative awareness and all branches of ritual, according to the tradition of Kriya Tantra, the Sagata made the results into the path. Kriya Tantra is the Tantra of action, and Sagata is another name for Buddha. So the tradition of action, or action Tantra, and utilizing ritual, it is also possible to make the result of all of that attainment into the path. The action Tantra is basically, in my book, another name for karma yoga. You're following the path of karma. You cleanse also through ritual. One of the reasons for all forms of ritual is to cleanse body, speech and mind, to invoke the deity and to have the mind as if it was that sound, that particular deity of which the ritual is evoking or invoking. And with reference to the inner tantras are the higher tantras, the same text says accordingly. Other than this, there's nothing to be obtained. When everything indeed has been ripened, there's nothing to be reached. The reality is the essence of the path. When everything indeed has been ripened, of course relates to the attainment of enlightenment, liberation, and what we call initiation. The higher initiations produce the ripening of the awareness of all that was and will be in your consciousness state. We talked before that in reality, what there is what Zen is called no mind. The mind itself is quiescent, it's clear, is absolutely pristine.
Now, if we say that we're to contact mind, the individual mind.
The individual mind, it's simply mind as such. It's universal mind, it's pristine, crystal clearness.
Right.
The clarity of that which in the beginning was, before anything was. Our predecessors too have claimed that there exists a distinction between the resultant vehicle, which can make the relative appearances into the path, and the causal vehicle, which cannot. Through the transcendental perfections, the ultimate reality is to be attained, and the relative appearances are to be renounced. But through the mantras, relative appearances are to be made into the path without being renounced, since sameness with respect to all things is experienced. Now this is the difference on a whole between this path of the secret mantra and the path of the other Buddhist schools, where they basically talk about the renunciation of what appears. And what this particular path that we follow is about is that we don't renounce what appears on the surface of things or appears in consciousness. We transmute them. We use them as a mechanism of gaining enlightenment. We see the wisdom in all. We transform them, all aspects of life's path, into that which produces the wisdoms of the 5 Dhyana Buddhas. Do you understand this distinction? Therefore, we become victors, or jina is the term for it, lions of the Dharma. And there's a text sutra called the Lion's Roar.
Is that why the Buddha's called the lion?
That's one reason why the Buddha is called the lion, because he has mastered all aspects of the materialistic jungle we call samsara.
Right.
He's courageous in all aspects, but technically the Buddha did it through the renunciation. And what we, the Nyingma traditions, say from Guru Rinpoche, it's not renunciation that what really concerned with. That is one method. What we say the superior method is riding every horse to the enlightenment stage.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So when we're zapping DBs, let's say we zap a wolf. Is it not better than to convert the wolf than to blow it away altogether, because then the wolf will then come back again?
That's right. We deal eventually with conversion. Conversion is the only name in cosmos. When it comes back, you zap it. And when it comes back, you zap. And it's really just the externalization of your internal samskaras or states of mind, your psychosomatic constitution. Eventually, when you master that aspect of yourself, the wolf waves a white flag on a whole groups of them, and then you convert. And when you're converted, then it's the next step onwards to the road of salvation. You use skillful means in the education of that group of sentient beings. They're now on their path to Buddhahood. And you've taught them a valuable lesson that to abide in muck and throw muck at other beings is not the way to go. Light is a far better vehicle.
That's going to change everything, because rather than extinction, it's inviting them in for a cup of tea and really trying to convert them.
Yes. Haven't you understood that there's no such thing as death? What dies? How can anything die? Everything just changes, transmogrifies from one form to the next. Even the Buddha's teaching of the 6 realms teaches you that. From animal to preta, from preta to the hells or wherever, you go around this loopy wheel. You travel, changing from one form to the other. And occasionally you get this precious human rebirth, hopefully in Buddhist terminology into the body of a man, so you become a monk, and then you can ride on the crest wave of the sutras and the grace of your gurus to become a Buddha. That's basically the story, is it not? You change from one form to the other. Eventually you change from this ignorant state that you exist in now into the Buddha mind. But there's no death. What dies? The only thing that dies is your concept of self. Have any of you ever looked in the mirror? I mean, done it with regards to a pimple.
Here we go.
I know. All of you missed out.
Don't.
All of you missed out on this beautiful talk I gave on Monday. All of you missed out on that. But
I mean, the pimple died.
yeah, the pimple
The
died.
film will die. No,
But
it hasn't died.
you look at that mirror and you say, is this what I was when I was 20? And you pick up a picture of what you were when you're 20. And you say, is this what I was when I was 5? And you pick up a picture when you were 5. And I got a picture of me as a really curly-haired sort of young lout of about 1 year old. Now, is that 1 year old me now? I mean, I was only about that big, I think. Something like that. Yeah, my mum used to dress me up as a girl and push me around the pram. Now, are those the same being? That 1 year old has died. It's still here. I mean, we can still point at it and say, that's. The form is changing all the time. And eventually the form is dropped behind, and whatever is the essence of the form, the consciousness leaves it. Right? It goes into a Bodo state, to use the Tibetan term. But it continues. It does not stop. It transmogrifies. And eventually it seeks out one of those precious human rebirths. What? for? Well, it's got a lot of karma to cleanse because it's heading for Buddhahood in the end. It eventually will get there. This, there's no doubt. Even those of us, like you and I, have been travelling for longer than the solar system. We're laggards from a previous existence. All of our brothers and sisters have been long Buddhas from long ago, and they're out there in the stars waiting for us to come to them. But we'll get there. In this life, next life, eventually we'll get there. I know we will.
Does that not mean that we're reincarnating every minute?
Yes. St. Paul said it, I die daily. Every thought that you have, you're reincarnating into a new thought. I go into the subject of the I concept.
Well, that's eventually when it comes down to that idea why you or anything is not real, because it's transient. But when you look in detail at that, it's perpetually in flux. Like there's not a moment, like you're saying, or every minute, and then you get to a moment, and then the Buddhists try and break a moment up into 17 parts, and then you say, well, what's part of those 17 parts?
So what dies? Well, it's your concept of ego, is it not? The I, the me, the mine, that dies. It must die eventually. It's going to leave that body. And the maggots can have what's left unless you burn it. Okay, so the maggots have got it and they're busy munching on their prized morsels of whatever you thought was you. What's left? Think about it all the time. It's a good way to keep you on the path to enlightenment and keep you zapping. Transmogrify those tantra, please. Transmute them into enlightenment attributes. Or a beautiful way of saying it is transmute them into the Buddha families, the Tathagata families. Work upon them continuously. Don't leave any hydras or serpents' heads alive. Trample on them like the dakinis do and the herukas do. Keep on making a funeral pile of all those lusts and desires and your petty aspects, all those things that you think is you. Because those things that you think is you is not you. Is that not so? So in the end we get this basket case that was once Tom Engels. He doesn't know where he is anymore, who he is or who he was. Is that what's about, to produce insanity? That's one definition of a selfless person, is it not? There's no self in an insane person. And matter of fact, there can be all pile of cells and they're all fighting with each other. That bag of bones is suddenly a house full of lots of cells. How many times have you guys, or any of you, talked to yourselves in the mirror or driving a car or whatever, or sworn at yourselves like I have? Now, there's two of you there. There's one that's acting around and another one that's telling the actor.
To get into shape.
So how many selves are you? So you understand that the classic Buddhist dialogue has always been, what is self? Can you find the self? And they've got all sorts of arguments as to dissecting the self into its parts, and they can say, is the part the one or is the part the many? I go into my I concept and I eradicate some of these arguments. But at the same time, there's the reality behind it, because when you're talking about the self that you regard as yourself, that in reality does not exist. It's a fabrication. It was created lives and lives and lives ago. Was it not? Your lives in Tibet, your lives in India, your lives in China, your lives in the West. All those lives coming to produce some sort of fabrication that came together when that naughty little sperm hit that egg. And voila, the egg grew into some sort of phantasmagorical sort of pile of protoplasm. Okay, that's what you are, protoplasm. Bones and sinew and blood. And ultimately, you say, well, yeah, it's got to do with consciousness. The real you is consciousness. Somehow it's conscious. But what is it conscious of? Is it conscious of Tom Engels, or is it conscious of what Tom Engels was 3 lives ago? Oh, when it's deceased, when it's no longer thinking as this particular self, what is it thinking of? What is it merged into? All of the complete potpourri of a billion different thoughts from a whole pile of lives is mingled together like a grab bag, and one pops out. Oh, this rabbit has suddenly appeared, or that rabbit. You understand, it's a real problem. And for Buddhist metaphysicians, this has been a major one. They haven't properly solved it, I don't think. No, the current ideologies. But they know what selflessness is. and I know that that is the end goal of everything. Selflessness is what we are endeavouring to achieve. But with the Nyingma stream, what we say that there is selflessness, that's the ground, yes. But what we are riding, the horse we are riding, that is the dharmakāya of a Buddha. Ride it well, this dharmakāya aspect. Make everything that you do a Buddha attribute. And what we are saying in this doctrine is that when this mind as it is comes to the surface at any particular moment of the event horizon that is you, and it is busy transmogrifying those attributes of the past into Buddha attributes, then at that very moment, verily, it is a Buddha. This is almost a heretical statement, but it is the truth. Do not denigrate yourself. When you're dying to the concept of self, and you're bringing about Buddha attributes, at that moment you are Buddha. And if you can ride that all the way through, the past and the present and the future are one. You are, and manifesting the Buddha mind. This existence, as you go to the mastering of those problems, you're becoming a Buddha. When they're no longer problems, then the Buddha state has been achieved with regard to that problem, is it not? And of course another one appears and raises its head, but that is the process. The process is the path. It's not a goal in itself, it is the path. Even when you're highly enlightened, there's always challenges. Even Gautama had challenges. When his cousin Devadatta sort of attacked him and so forth, these are challenges. When he first took his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree and had to sit there for 49 days wondering whether actually to speak it out to anyone, that was another challenge. We can go with others, but what I'm trying to point out is that the whole process is one challenge after the other, and we grow as a consequence. We become enlightened beings. And we grow in the realm of enlightened beings. There's no ending. There's only beginnings. What we say is that relative appearances are made into the path without being renounced, since sameness with respect to all things is experienced. So we don't renounce everything, we turn them into the path, we turn every challenge into the elixir of immortality, into the process of enlightenment for us. So we renounce nothing, we take on board everything. And this is where many Nyingma have fallen prey, because they've interpreted this particular process wrongly. They say we renounce nothing, we take on board everything, therefore they take on board alcohol, loose women, drugs, or whatever, mixed in with their ritual. And this is not what we take on board. What we take are those things that are productive of enlightenment attributes. We don't take on board those things which keep us honed into samsara, keep us perpetually addicted to the attributes of samsara, that which debase our consciousness, that which debase our forms. Skillful means is forgotten here. They haven't looked at the entire picture. They've only looked at one aspect of it and distorted it, because it suits them, suits their lifestyles. Where's the skillful means in taking alcohol? There's none. Skillful means if you're interested in creating health states. But what human being wants to create health states for themselves purposefully? And it does not produce enlightenment. You'll understand this? Misinterpretation of this particular aspect of the Nyingma doctrine. Therefore, what I'm going to say is that it's the fastest way, technically, but it's the hardest. Because the process of misinterpretation is quite vast. It's not that easy to live on samsara and ride on samsara to enlightenment. The path of renunciation is a little bit easier from that point of view, more certain. It may mean another life, but it's more certain. This is the way where you gain Buddhahood in one life, technically, as Buddhism say. But this tantra is dangerous, unless you have a skillful teacher, one wise teacher who can show you all the subtleties of the allurements of the path. For instance, wolves. How many of you are besotted by wolves? And how many out there even know what a wolf is when they're thinking they're becoming enlightened? They don't. So they live in the wolf's mind and get nowhere. You need an enlightened teacher to show you the subtleties of the psychic maze which you enter into when you try to ride samsara, as it is, as a ground to Buddhahood. The path of renunciation is easier as far as that goes, but it's definitely longer. Unless, of course, the Nyingma chooses this wrong method of interpretation, I'm told, in this case, that could be aeons. Any questions or comments?
I just need clarification here. All these elaborate weapons that I've now developed and been using for my zapping and for other people's zapping, it's best for me to put them aside, because what I really need to do, if I'm understanding this correctly, is to take on board those energies and to transform them, transmute them, rather than trying to destroy them as I've been doing.
No. Whenever you use light or sound, this is secret mantra. You transmute them using light and sound. However, unless you work upon the psychological attributes of those entities that you are zapping represent within your own psyche, you will not get very far. It's only when you transform the qualities within your own psyche, your own samskaras, can you also defeat those entities. There's inner and outer, and the two work together. The deeply external to yourself are working with attributes you have within yourself that they can gain access to. If they can't gain access to it, then they'll try to cause pain. And ultimately they can only cause pain when you have substance of similar quality to theirs that they can work with. I can't touch molten steel, for instance. It will sizzle my hand. And if your energy body is like molten steel to them, they can't get anywhere near it. Does that make sense to all of you? It's a process. It's a psychic process that we use because of your training, because of the development of inner perceptions that we are awakening within you, because your training is multidimensional. It's not just to do with the physical plane and the concrete mindedness of this particular world that people live in, but we're trying to teach you also the realm of enlightened being, the world that you enter into as you gain finer perceptions. And so you do the zapping. But can you do it purely through psychological means? No. You still ultimately need the training of the zapping, because you've got to go into refined states of awareness to do with the awakening of chakras, which concerns the higher tantras, the secret mantra, the ear-whispered truths of the Guru. Sutras alone will not produce it. Working upon psychology alone will not produce it. Sitting in a mountaintop in a cave, chanting the same words, and all thinking of nothing, or nothingness, or egolessness alone will not produce it. It's a torturous path if you choose that. You'll probably die of starvation or something similar. You've got to have the teaching from the enlightened Guru, as Milarepa did in regards to Mapa. Only Mapa could give it to him, nobody else. This is in Sanskrit called Guru Parampada, the successional lineage of the teacher. And this is necessary on the stage of the path. Fortunately for you, you have me. I bring to you this tradition with my lineage behind me.
I'll just continuing on from Ron's question. So when you're talking about transforming the mind, there's zapping and there's transforming the mind. Are at one point those two like, well, they are like the yayum of transformation. But in a sense, when you're zapping, you're also transforming your mind. Or when you use the phrase transforming your mind or working on your psychology, do you mean sort of using the sutra-based logic of removing delusion, seeing things clearly, learning to see things as they are.
Yes.
Is that what you would term?
Yeah, working on the psychology, it means that. Plus also to properly begin to perceive the nature of the karma, past lives activities that have produced that, and to cleanse that as well. As you awaken to finer perceptions, the incidences of the past that produce the now and which flow into the future, or the future now, if you want, or the eternal now, is seen for what it is. This is what is wisdom, or productive of wisdom.
This sort of union seems like one of our special gifts, because if you sit there and just try and work on your psychology, often you're so caught in it, you're so polluted by its energies that you don't get anywhere. But yet if you just purely put faith or energy into visualization and transformation, whilst that's more powerful, you're not affecting some of the root causes. And so when you unite these two, it's very beautiful.
That's right. Therefore we teach you knowledge as well as the application. This is what makes you lovers and very wise beings indeed, what makes you enlightened. You become Buddhas as you apply. For every moment that you unite those two, you have the Buddha mind in application. The difference between us and a Buddha is that you flit in and out of the Buddha mind, whereas a Buddha never leaves his primordial state. Therefore, the mantra vehicles are superior because they do not fall into biased tendencies with respect to the two truths, the ultimate truth and the conventional truth. We do not fall into biased thinking because we fuse the ultimate with the conventional into a unity, what I call relative truth. And in my I concept, the whole book is about relative truth, relativity. We do not fall into biased tendency with respect to the two truths. The sequence of the path says, this is in the sutra, within the unsurpassed vehicle, there are those hold ultimate reality to be indivisible, and relative appearances to include everything. Ultimate reality, for instance, sunyata. It's not divisible, it just simply is the ultimate. And relative appearances is what our forms are all about, to include everything, in other words, all space and all time. Both the pure and the impure. The great vehicle of skillful means, however, which is the path I'm describing to you, does not divide even relative appearances according to purity and suffering. The higher and the lower views are just so. What he's basically saying is that if you have this enlightened mind, we do not care about what he uses to say purity and suffering. Does not even divide even relative appearances according to purity and suffering. How much do you suffer? You suffer a little bit, or you suffer massively? What is the relativity of the suffering that you are experiencing at the time? What is its cause? Its cause is the same. Some obscurity of mind, some samskara, some attitude or attachment that you have manifested in this life based on past lives and samskaras. Let go of it all. Master it all. Go through the minor suffering, go through the larger suffering, go through the minor transmutation, go through the larger transmutation. They're all the same, really. They're all impurities, obscurations of mind that need transforming. Work upon the smaller as the larger, as they come, as the karma comes to the surface. Deal with them. Don't be concerned with either one or the other. That is the vehicle of expression to Buddhahood. Be thankful that it's happening. Be joyous. Use it as an opportunity for gaining wisdom. Okay, so an earthquake comes and your house has just been destroyed. Would that really sort of give you lots of cause for suffering? Some regret maybe, you look back and say, oh, now I can be fully a yogi. You can use calamities as a mechanism of propelling you onwards to another life sphere, another form of attainment.
This whole notion of purity is one that's quite contentious, I've found, in in the tantric philosophy, because one way that you clarified it earlier was to say, in regards to riding samsara and not rejecting any aspects of the sort of illusional world, and we discussed that, well, you don't engage yourselves in things that are impure, and they often use the word disregard the sense of purity and things like this. And I just had the thought that, are they possibly referring to conceptual, social, moral purity, whereas we're trying to look at psychic purity?
Yes, we're looking at psychic purity.
Whereas they're looking at a dualistic concept of what society regards, like society regards on their level sex as impure, let's say. And so they're saying, well, forget that.
Yes, we say that there's no distinction between those things. Sex is only impure when the mind itself is defiled, when the mind is attached to the desire or need to repetitively procure sexual expression.
Okay, but they would say the same about meat eating and alcohol drinking.
Yes, but we say if anything is productive of the prevention of the generation of the five wisdoms that slows down or retards the process, then it should be transmogrified or left behind.
But wouldn't that be based on the state of mind?
The state of mind, when we go into yoga philosophy now, cannot transform the pranas of meat eating, the pranas of alcohol, the pranas of coarse food or coarse forms of actions very easily.
So it can, but it requires so much more effort.
It contains a mountaineer's effort when really you need to be able to jump over a small pebble in front of you instead of creating a mountain for you to transform. So it's not skillful means. We go back to skillful means. What they forget is the adjunct to use skillful means at every turn of the dice. And they're not using skillful means, they're using very unskillful means to dig themselves deeper into samsaric maya with a mind-conceived notion that they can somehow transform that substance when they cannot.
And thus they're on the indirect path rather than the direct.
They are on a direct path to hell states. The karmic consequence of the suffering that caused to other sentient beings, because they're not thinking skillfully or logically. You eat meat, you cause suffering. You cause suffering, you must pay back the suffering. Therefore, you tie yourself to samsara. How can you obtain Buddhahood if you tie yourself to samsara in a deeper and deeper crescendoing knots? It's not wise thinking. It's not liberated thinking. It's not using skillful means. Therefore, it is not really Dharma. It's adharma, the opposite to Dharma. It is a fool pretending that they are wise men, teaching fools. I mean, that's my answer to that. I mean, some of you can cut this out and turn it into a text and give it to all these people. Yes, I'll be answering this many times in the Nyingma world.
This also relates to a whole range of things, not all as gross as meat eating, but certain emotional states and energy states.
Of course.
Embodied.
Hang on to any of those emotional energy states, you're not going the way of enlightenment, you're going the way of samsara. You must purify and refine at every step of the way. This is skillful means, this is riding a horse to enlightenment. As a matter of fact, both in Zen Buddhism, the 10 stages of drawing the oxen, and in Tibetan Buddhism, they've got these stages of the monkey. I don't know the exact thing. I've seen pictures of it when the monkey gets a black brain and gets a half of a white brain and so forth, until eventually it's cleansed, because the monkey mind or the ox refers to the state of mind that must be cleansed. But both of these images, you've got the process of gradual purification, of the process of gradually becoming enlightened being through more and more heightened psychic purification. You cannot manifest this path through riding the ox into the deepest shithole and think that somehow you're going to transmogrify that way. It's just simply not going to happen. You ride the path to the highest mountain and jump off into the sun.
When you said before about through that action, the beings were tying themselves to samsara. So I sort of saw this idea of how to avoid that, and it's like we try to walk through samsara, like all the forms and the aspects of it, but yet nothing of us sticks to any part of it. We don't attach ourselves to any part of it. I guess it was kind of an energetic thing, but yet we were there and our forms were there, but it was almost like it wasn't a dense substance, so it could just walk through things like walls and all that sort of thing. But that represented...
What we do in this path is that we use all aspects of samsara without attachment to any of it. There's not the slightest concept of attachment. Therefore, if it doesn't happen tomorrow, for instance, if your desire for sex doesn't happen, you're not attached to it. It's not going to cause pain. It's not going to cause suffering. And you follow on with whatever the next moment of karma is for you, according to the precepts of the gurus. When I use the term precepts of the gurus, of course I'm talking to the inner instruction of the guru within, and that teaches you what the next step is, and you follow that. Effortlessly, spontaneously, and desirelessly. And if these beings who are taking the meat or whatever, they think that they're doing this effortlessly, spontaneously, and desirelessly, I would say no. I would say there is great desire for the addiction that they have to that particular substance. Whether it's smoking, or taking dope, or whether it's meat, or any other repetitious action, there's normally always an addiction there. This is not an easy path. If the path to enlightenment was easy, the world would be full of Buddhas. Right? Maitreya would be a group Maitreya. You'd see hundreds of Maitreyas everywhere. You don't see this. The path to enlightenment is hard. It's transmogrification. There's all sorts of attachments to self. There's all sorts of attachments to all aspects that the self is pleased with. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. The self gets pleased with things, so it attaches itself to the things it gets pleased with. And it's no longer doing this yoga. It's involved with samsara. And also, if you're riding this yogic path of disattachment and you're grumbling and complaining all the way, it's still not the way. Right? It's still not this horse of the Buddha mind. This path to enlightenment is joy and produces bliss. So every further renunciation is another great step of joy or blissful state. And don't want to have to drag any of you onto enlightenment or nirvana, sort of grumbling and complaining all the way behind me. Oh, woe is me, I've had to let go of this and I've had to let go of that and I've just lost all my money or whatever. This is not it, is it? You can see that already you're creating all sorts of new sanskaras of complaints. You say, wow, sort of hit me again. Yes, please. If that's what your karma is. Right? Give me another blow. That's what Jesus said. You ride those things and your joy is because you're cleansing karma. Because you're freed from that burden. Whoopee, you no longer have to carry this tail of karma around you like an ass. Leave the baggage behind. It doesn't do you or anyone else in the world any good whatsoever. Be free from all of that. And then you can ride on the clouds of all the great ones. Become a dakini if need be, a sky goer, a sky dancer. Light and free to go everywhere and every which way. In all directions at once in time and space. Simultaneously. Without any obligation to get, of course, that which is your bodhisattva vows. Does that make it easy for you? Are you all happy to suffer all the woes of this world and be joyous as it's happening to you?
We'll do an imprint of this mantra to be recited eternally, and then it'll be easy.
Yes, I know. Of course, my big woe is bureaucracy. I don't like bureaucracy, one little bit, and sometimes you can see me cursing underneath my breath when I'm sort of confronted with it. But I still have to sit there and do my mantras of patience and say, okay, karma, okay, this is joy. But you understand that ultimately you as yogis have to produce internally this quiet, serene mind, Whether you're sitting in a cave, whether you're confronted with bureaucracy, whether you're waiting at a railway station and the train is 2 hours late, as it often is in India, doesn't really matter. You do something or find something or meditate. I used to always have to carry around in my bag a book to read or to write. It was impossible for me to go anywhere about something, just in case I was confronted with bureaucracy or 2 hour delayed train. Now I don't do that. I've learned some time ago I no longer need to think I've got to fill those times. I can meditate. I can practice serenity of mind. Of course, it's useful sometimes to read a paper or whatever, but it's still the same. And this is what you've got to do. It doesn't matter if you're in a jail or if you're out of a jail. Really, if that's your karma, that's your karma. Enjoy it. That's not going to last forever.
I find waiting at train stations one of my greatest joys, so that's never been a big problem for me. But I think maintaining that quiet, serene mind, maybe when there's a lot of beings around you that don't have that disposition, or if you're very active or getting very involved in, as you said, trying to kind of develop this thing that yourself has worked out as very pleasing, and it's got its grand plans about.
What happens in these sort of cases is you get caught up in the self-image of others.
Mm.
They need nourishment for their little selves, and therefore they come to you, demanding that you nourish their little selves with an acknowledgement that they exist. So you talk the time of day, or whatever it is, it's the chatter. Sometimes it's fine, you play the game. But inwardly, you're serene, you live in this ground of the Buddhas, this empty mind. And if you can sustain this primordial mind, this clear mind at all times, then what is there that's there? What is there that's you? That's the joy, is it not? That is joyous. Nothing can harm you anymore. Baby can't touch you. They're gone. Of course, then other people say, can you please help me? You have to look and go down and see where now their DB are. Yeah, they over there. That's okay. That's your service work. Skillful means you're here to help others. We're not to become practitioner Buddhas. We're here to be bodhisattvas. Okay, now, according to the system, that is, the vehicle of skillful means, and this is what we've been talking about all the time, whether it's small sufferings or large sufferings, it doesn't really matter. We skillfully sort of ride through it all and transmogrify the resultant karma, the samskaras. The result is made into the path because the essence of the result, in which all things are indivisible, is regarded as the Buddha body of reality, in which appearances and emptinesses are coalesced and experienced by skillful means. So you understand that? The Buddha body of reality, in which appearances and emptinesses are coalesced. So this mind in its natural abode, and all the phenomenality of samsara that's happening around you and through you, are merged into one. Easy to say, difficult to achieve, yes? But in all of you, this happens at moments, at times. And what you're trying to do is to make the process of it happening in longer and longer durations. Then you live in timelessness. And believe me, you forget the days and months and years like I do, and even sometimes forget how to speak properly. Forget, for instance, what a cell phone is, and my mind's empty. There's nothing there, and it's trying to come up with some word that everyone knows is a cell phone, and it just doesn't appear. And sometimes it does. But that's not really a Buddha mind. I suppose a Buddha mind is when it's always there, like that, when it's needed. So there's still a transition.
Oh, it's this kind of theme of steadfastness, and about what you were saying, and about trying to expand, and the steadfastness and the immovability of being, having that awakened Buddha mind. How is that done? What's the most skillful way of achieving an extended sojourn into a Buddha mind?
Every means that you use is skillful. What I'm trying to get to is this, that there's different things that happen in life that agitate the mind, that confront the personality, different challenges that meet it. And so you may be sort of riding on a nice peaceful stream, and all of a sudden somebody comes out of your blue at the railway station and starts chatting to you. And whatever your meditation was is interrupted by the necessity to answer. Okay, how do you skillfully answer while you're still riding your meditation mind? That's your task. And this is what you have to do. You actually have to learn to generate a contemplative mind while engrossed in samsaric activity. Even when somebody is chatting to you, only a portion of you is active, because you really don't need much of your mind to answer somebody's general chatter. Skillfully, you try to figure the best thing to say to that person and move on in the shortest possible way. Nice weather today, or whatever, you say yes, then you move on. In reality, you don't need to talk to people who are primarily concerned with samsara. You're not there to impress them in any way. You don't have to tell them that you're a personality or that you have an ego. Right? You're trying to die to your ego. So what is there to impress? Do you care if they remember your face or your name? Does it really matter? Even friends, my friends from 20 years ago, are no longer my friends now. Lovers from 30 years ago or 20 years ago, I've forgotten even what they look like. They were important then, but one's moved on. They've moved on. Whatever ego I had then is gone. This is what's left. And this is quickly disappearing into the gurgle hole of time, into nothingness space, egolessness state, the enlightenment mind.
So when you're going through really severe testings, is that the appropriate moment to generate the contemplative mind, or is it more skillful to use the entirety of your force to sort of pick
Understand, you must generate the contemplative mind that is at all times compassionate, that is at all times engrossed in bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is really what it's about. A empty mind without bodhicitta is a cold mind, and that is the mind of a dark brotherhood, of a sorcerer. Notice the distinction. You are about love. So it's not always, whenever, as I said, when you use skillful means, you look at everyone that confronts you at the railway station, wherever it is, as to what is that person saying? Can I give to that person something that is useful to them? If not, then you move on. If it is possible, then you give that. You're not there for your own ego's sake, you're there for their sake. You look at every being that comes your way as a karmic moment. What is the karma? How is the karma to be cleansed? How is that person to be assisted to become a Buddha? How shall I become a Buddha as I do so? Of course, you never think like that, because you already are Buddha. As long as you are working for the helping of that individual, and thoughts in your mind are manifesting as to the best thing to give to them, that is a Buddha mind. That is Mahamudra that we speak here.
if it's fused with wisdom?
If it's fused with wisdom, of course. It should always be fused with wisdom. That's what bodhicitta is, isn't it? The mind with wisdom. Okay, do you understand this? This is again, you don't avoid samsara. You utilize samsara skillfully for the helping of sentient beings. And as you do so, you yourself gain your Buddhahood. Already are Buddha. At that moment, at that time. It says in the Tantra of the extensive magical net, what a wonderful tantra that is, the extensive magical net. In the nature of appearances, including the animate and inanimate world, there is no inherent essence. This itself is the great body of reality. I would have to actually question this concept of inherent essence, because I say there is inherent essence in everything. So I would actually have to look at what they mean by no inherent essence. The Buddha nature, the Tathagata Garbha, is in everything.
But possibly looking at the essence as being inherently existing.
Yeah, probably. The way of secret mantra is verbally defined as that which makes the result into the path, and as the vehicle of indestructible reality, because through the outer mantras one meditates with reference to the body, speech and mind of the deity. And, according to the inner mantras, all things are realized and then experienced as the natural expression of the mandalas of the Buddha body, speech and mind. So basically what you're learning, for instance, when you do the zapping, is the inner mantras. When you do ritual, you're doing the outer mantras, right? And what you're trying to do as you do your zapping, you're trying to turn everything into the natural expression of the mandalas of Buddha body, speech and mind. The miraculous key to the storehouse says, concerning the resultant vehicle of indestructible reality, when the mandala of the seals has been made into the path, the result itself is then carried on the path. One's own body, speech and mind are united in the indestructible reality of Buddha body, speech and mind. Such is indicative of the vehicle of indestructible reality. I'm going to stop it here because the mandala of the seals needs a bit of explanation. It's a wonderful concept, is it not? There's a footnote here. This is on page 246 of this particular book, anyone that wants to read it. Understand, all of you, that I'm giving you this sequence of talks so that you've got a chance of teaching those that come your way the Buddha Dharma. What I'm teaching is basically a Nyingma approach, because this is the closest of all of the schools of the four Tibetan sects that you follow. It's also the essence of Rinpoche. Rinpoche itself is really a fusion of the Nyingma and the Kagyu schools, but we are trying to give it a far vaster meaning than it did then by including the Geluk doctrine and esoteric doctrines as well. So it's Rinpoche for this new modern epoch we live in, and not just the Tibet of Kung Fu and Mipam who founded this teaching. Okay, what I was basically saying to you, that Rinpoche is called non-sectarian, but it's non-sectarian in a type of sectarian attitude. It's non-sectarian because it's thinking in terms of fusion of specifically the Nyingma and the Kagyu schools of thought. Whereas I'm saying our version of Rinpoche is really the fusion of Nyingma, Kagyu, Geluk, and the esoteric tradition which you know into one packet. And we call this Rinpoche. What we could do is maybe phrase it as modern Rinpoche or new Rinpoche